I think it's important to note that when we talk about watch style, whenever possible, we try to talk about the people who designed the watches. And I'm happy to say that we have Ariel Adams of Ablogtowatch, who is gracious enough to answer a question from our viewers. This AP 25th anniversary discussion really brings design to the fore, and architects, auto and fashion designers are stars, and they might even be household names in some cases. But with the exception of historic scholarship in the watch space, we seldom know the names of the men and women behind the likes of Rolex, Patek Philippe, Vacheron Constantin, and other top brands. Why is that, and will we ever know? Ariel answers.
Hey everyone, Ariel Adams here from Ablogtowatch. I'm going to answer another question for the audience. This question is, will we ever know the names of the designers of today's Rolex, Omega, or even Patek Philippe, i.e. high-lux watches, the way we know Gerald Genta, George Heisek, and Emmanuel Guit from previous generations? This is an excellent question, and I agree that there seems to be a disconnect between the people that design watches and the people that make watches and the people that buy watches. Very few of us know the actual person responsible for the designs of many of the watches that we most admire. And that's actually not by accident. Brands, especially Swiss brands, are highly protective of this information. Oftentimes, these brands hire outsiders to assist with a range of things, ranging from design to production to refinement to all kinds of things that they oftentimes don't want you to know about. And even if they do, they really want to focus all the attention on them, especially when products are new. So my first response to this question is that at the time when Gerald Genta and George Heisek, for example, were designing for other brands, most people didn't know who they were. It was, 1972, the Royal Oak came out, and other watches like the Nautilus, and a lot of other watches that were designed by Gerald Genta. No one really knew it was from Gerald Genta. It was Audemars Piguet or Patek Philippe that got the credit. It wasn't until later that I understand people knew these names. George Heisek is a little bit more of a recent designer. He did things for Tag Heuer, for example. And he's not particularly known for that, but he is known for the Heisek brand, which he's actually no longer associated with. I know him personally. He's a nice, humble guy, but I wouldn't say that he sits there and thinks about the designs he made in the past. I don't know that he has the emotional connection to them that a lot of the people that like their watches do. Gerald Genta is no longer with us, but he is sort of famous for saying things like, I don't really like watches. He was a very good designer of watches coming from someone that didn't really like watches. And so I think it's important for people to understand that not all watches today are essentially, or in the past, have been designed by people who consider themselves serious watch lovers. You do have niche brands, smaller brands that very much focus the person behind the design, and these brands follow what I call the art market in terms of the trend of focusing on the artist as opposed to the work. The artist, the popularity of the artist, the story of the artist is what helps sell the work, and brands like MB&F have been very good at capitalizing on that, focusing as much on the people as the things they create. So I do think that in the future, because there is such a robust community of people to talk about watches, the timepieces that today are popular, it will be discovered who designed them. More conversations will come, but during their production life cycle, or at least the initial production life cycle, the brands aren't going to make that information particularly well known because they want to take credit themselves for understandable business reasons. So going back to the question, will we ever know the names of designers of today's watches? Perhaps we will, but it'll be a little bit after the fact. It'll be several years from now, ideally before these individuals pass away. Another thing which is important to remember is that a lot of today's watches are designed to look like older watches or inspired by older watches. So the design of watches today is very different than the design of watches when watches were still a utilitarian item that everybody needed. Cars today are the same type of thing. There's luxury cars and there's standard cars, but ultimately everyone needs a car. So there's a lot more attention around car design because it is a practical item that the rich and the poor together both rely on, whereas watches, at least for luxury watches, are intended only for a specific audience that are purchasing them for reasons outside of their mere utility. So I think that today we'll actually know more and more about the people designing the truly original watches. But someone like Rolex, you have to ask yourself, yes, of course they hire designers, but are they really coming up with a lot that's new? Or are they making small derivative works based upon timepieces from the past? And is the contribution of the designers that are making those things as important as those guys like Gerald Genta, for example, that came up with a lot of arguably much more original work? So that's an interesting question to ask. But again, I do think that more of the names today involved in the design of popular watches will come out. We're just going to have to wait. Thank you.
All right. So that was Ariel Adams on the whole concept of identifying basically the people behind our watches. Now, there are some celebrities today who are designer names such that their brands will endorse their participation and reveal it. But a lot of times you just have to wait for the right watch scholar in the long run to unveil the man behind the machine, or the woman in many cases these days. Remember, it wasn't known that Gerald Genta actually created the Patek Philippe Nautilus and the Royal Oak until many years later, principally due to Japanese wristwatch scholars who unearthed that information. So stay tuned, we may know yet. Pick your favorite and then play the waiting game.